Thank you guys for coming to the Retirement and Savings Workshop. We're going to start it off with a quick question. So, which salary is better? Is it the $60,000 salary or is it the $100,000 salary? You're probably thinking, obviously, the $100,000 salary. If you're maybe a business or econ major, you might be thinking, that depends on the tax rate because the U.S. has a progressive tax. So, but what if we said that the taxes on the two were exactly the same? They both paid 30% in taxes. Which one is better? Right. So you're probably thinking, well, then obviously the $100,000 one is better. Not always true. And this is one of the most important things that you guys need to think about when you start applying for jobs or you start trying to get internships. Cost of living, right? So $60,000 in Dallas might actually give you more take-home income than $100,000 in New York City. What do I mean by that? Well, when you add up all the expenses, housing, food, transportation, entertainment, clothes, all that kind of stuff, maybe in Dallas, it costs you $35,000 a year to do that, to live, right? So then you're gonna get $25,000 out that you have as disposable income that you can use to invest or to save. Maybe in New York, it's actually $80,000. I'm not saying it is, but it might be, and you need to make sure you look at that. And then, of course, at the end, you'd only have $20,000. So, depending on your location, well, basically what I'm saying is that salary isn't everything, right? And we actually have tools here at Texas A&M. You can go to the Money Management Center or the Career Center, and they can hook you up with calculators and other resources that you can compare real salaries, that's like after taxes and after cost of living has been deducted across different cities. So when you go into an interview, you can say, I'm actually looking to work in this particular city. I see you have a job open there, I want to work here. And you're doing that because if you don't, you might end up with a higher salary and a lower take-home that you can use to invest or retire. So let's calculate how to retire, essentially. Now, you can use this exact same type of formula to track any kind of investment. If you're running a private foundation, you can use this to determine how much will the initial principal that you're given by your donor, how much is that going to grow in the next 1, 2, 3 years, and what happens if we take stuff out. Very customizable. If you have any questions about that, you can send it into ASPPNservice@gmail.com, and we can set up an individual consultation with y'all, or we can try to answer the question over the email, whichever one you prefer. But anyway, let's go over this retirement equation. So you're going to start off with a summation. X equals 0 to the years you want to work. So if you're going to enter the workforce at 22 and you want to retire when you're 62, this number is going to be 40. If you can figure that out. Okay, so then what you're going to do is you're going to have a bracket, parenthesis, 1 plus the rate of return on your investment. I'll tell you which one we're using for this example. And legal disclaimer, I guess, nothing in this presentation is supposed to be financial advice. It's all just a baseline for knowledge, and you should always consult a financial professional before making investment decisions. Okay, so 1 plus the return on your investment, right? Raised to X. X is, depending on the point of the summation, X is going to be different, but it's going to be from 0 to your total years of retirement. Essentially what that does is it takes, every year you're going to put in a certain amount to the stock market, it's going to take that, it's going to grow it according to the rest of the equation, and that's going to add up all the years that have been grown together, and that'll give you your total package at the end. So you're going to take your rate there, and you're going to multiply it by parenthesis income, that's going to be your salary before taxes, minus the income tax. There's a lot of good resources online. You can just look up, income tax calculator, and you'll get a bunch of different things. Anyway, so you figure out your after-tax income minus your personal expenses, and that's going to be based on your cost of living. For example, $35,000 you can actually live on $35,000 in Dallas if you live very, very tight. And then you bracket it. Times 1 minus capital gains tax. Now, if you don't know what capital gains tax is, whenever you have an investment and it goes up in value, so if you invest $100, 20 years from now, it's worth $2,000, then that difference in price is going to be taxed. Capital losses are not taxed. Those are, if you invest $100 and it goes down to $90 and you cash out, you can actually use that. You can actually use that $10 that went down, that capital loss, to offset some of your income tax or to offset other capital gains you have. And there's a bunch of different rules with that. But anyway, you're going to divide that by your 1 plus the inflation rate. And you're going to do the inflation rate and you're going to raise it to the amount of years you plan to work for. This equation is basically good for two things. If when you retire, you want to just cash out and you want to be like, I got my money, it's in the bank, okay, this is good for that. The other one is, this is good for the more normal case where you want to calculate how much money you're going to have to allocate into bonds or dividend accounts, like dividend stocks, once you retire so you can get like a passive income. You have to be really, really rich to just cash out and never do any kind of dividend or bonds or anything like that when you get to like an older age. Anyway, let's make this a little bit more practical. So let's talk about a job in Dallas. Now, we're going to be investing our money into a Vanguard S&P 500 index. Vanguard is a pretty cool service. It avoids stockbroker fees. Usually if you invest with a stockbroker, they're going to take 1 to 2% every single time you make a trade of a stock or when they make a trade for a stock. There's a lot of other fees and hidden stuff. A lot of times, stockbrokers, portfolio managers, hedge funds, that kind of thing, they don't usually hit the index. I probably should explain what an index is. So the S&P 500 is a group of a bunch of really big companies, all their stocks, right? So you got like Apple in there, you've got Johnson & Johnson probably, big names that you know about. So there's a bunch of these stocks in there and they put them together and it's very diverse. A bunch of different sectors are represented, sectors like financial, industrial, healthcare, all that kind of stuff, a bunch of different stuff. And it's used as a total market health index, right? It's really only large cap, meaning big companies, but when big companies move, little companies are affected by it. Not always perfect correlation, but pretty much. So the S&P 500 is something that is talked every day on the news. You can Google it and see it updating in real time during market hours. Basically, if you notice here, 1 plus the inflation rate, 1 plus the investment rate, I'm saying that the investment rate of return is 5.6%. Now, if you take a historical average from, I believe it's 1915 to 2015, you actually get 10% return every year on the S&P 500. However, if you take it from 2000 to 2015, it's 5.64. And Warren Buffett says you should expect to make 6% every year off the S&P 500. So if you care about what Warren Buffett says, there's that. But for our example, we're going to take the most conservative option we can to make sure that we really always hit our goals. If we take the most conservative option, we'll always hit our goals. So the Vanguard account has a 0.04% expense every single year. So we can take this 5.64 and put it down straight up to 5.6. Now remember, stockbrokers 1 to 2%. Vanguard 0.04%. Big difference, right? That's like 25 times higher for the cheap stockbroker, right? It's 50 times higher for the expensive one. So anyway, we put in that. We're going to say our income is $60,000. Our income tax is going to be $12,729. You can look that up, online calculator. We're going to subtract out our personal expenses. We're saying this person lives in Dallas and they're living very well below their means. because they want to, make sure they retire and make sure they can pay for their kids' college and all this other stuff. Capital gains tax. If you are in a very, very high income bracket, your capital gains will be 20%. Pretty much everyone else, it's 15%. 1 minus 15 is 85. And then if you are very, very low income, it's going to be 0. But for all intents and purposes, probably for your entire life, it'll be 0.85%. We're going to divide that by 1 plus 3.2. 3.2 is the average inflation rate. We're going to raise it to 40 years because we're saying this person is going to work for 40 years. All right? We run the numbers. And we're going to figure out this person's max real dollars from this investment strategy at this level of income, at that tax rate, at this, personal expenses, all that kind of thing. Now, you can add stuff to this equation, right? If you think you're going to get a raise of about 1% a year on your salary or 2% a year on your salary, you can take the 60,000 and multiply it by 1.01 raised to the x, right? And if you do that, then the salary within this equation is going to go up and up and up. And if you ever want a more personalized look, also with that you can customize this equation so that your raises stop after a certain amount of years. All that stuff is pretty easy to do. You can also have variable personal expenses. Say you have a kid, this is going to go up, right? You're not going to be able to live at $35,000 a year for a couple if you have a kid. Kids are very expensive. Also, if you have health problems later in life, that's going to go up, right? So that's all stuff that we can talk about more individually. This is kind of a starting point. When you're older, actually, you know what, right now, just go into the Money Management Center at Texas A&M and ask for an individual appointment and just ask them, hey, I want you to build me this equation but more customizable. I want you to show me everything that you can do with it, okay? And they'll help you out. Right, so this is pretty much our last thing. They say right now you need about $1 million to retire, right? Well, if you want to live comfortably when you retire, and if maybe you have unforeseen health problems, or you want to take a vacation, or you want to help put one of your children or grandchildren through school or something like that, let's go for 1.5 million. You're going to work 40 years. We don't know your rate of return on your investment. That's what we're trying to figure out. We're going to try to figure out with what you're living at right now, your salary, your tax rate, your expenses. We're going to try to figure out how you need to allocate your savings into investments so that you can actually hit this goal. Take your salary, take your taxes, take out your personal expenses, right? Then what we're going to do here is we're going to multiply it by the capital gains tax. We're going to divide it by the inflation. If you solve that, you get that, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to divide out 0.85. We're going to multiply by the inflation rate. And we're going to get 6,221,000 on the other side. Then that's going to equal x equals 0 to years of work, and you have the rest there. All of this goes down into $12,271. You're going to take this, you're going to divide both sides by $12,271. You're going to get 506.968. Then all you have to do is solve the summation, and you get 10.137% returns. Now, what does that mean? What does this number mean? If the S&P 500 stays on its historical average, you're good. Just do the S&P 500 index with Vanguard. If you don't do it with Vanguard, you're going to have a problem because your stockbroker, his little portfolio might return 12% a year, but his expense rate might be 3% a year, right? You always have to subtract out the expenses with whatever investment strategy you're pursuing. So if you try the Vanguard account, and S&P returns its usual returns, 10%, you're pretty much going to hit the 1.5 million. Now let's say it doesn't. Say the S&P actually only returns 5.6% for the rest of your career. You don't know. So let's talk about it. 10% a year, that's a lot. For a lot of, that's considered pretty hefty. You might want to look into real estate. You might want to look at, really up-and-coming technology companies. That's kind of tough. And if you're going to get 10% a year, you're probably going to need to pull in some sort of advisor, some sort of manager of your money somehow. And remember, you always have to make sure that their expense doesn't exceed the worthwhileness of using them for money, to generate more money. All right, but let's assume that you start off with, because that sounds pretty scary, right? Like, so you're saying that if I have a $60,000 salary, I have to make this like huge, percentage of returns every year, and I can only live at this super low. This isn't fun. It's not fun to live like this. This isn't taking a vacation ever. This is, buying like rice and beans and eggs for food. That's quite cheap. That's living in a bad apartment. That's taking public transportation. That's never going out to the movies. That's eating in, except for a couple times a week, that kind of thing. Not the most fun. So let's look at it a different way. And we told you earlier that salary isn't as important as cost of living, right? But salary is pretty important, okay? If you have a $100,000 salary, after taxes, that yields $74,211. That's after taxes. All right? When you take out your expenses, you can have $39,211, right? If you live like this. So if you're living in Dallas, and you have a $100,000 salary, and you're living in at a level most people would find uncomfortable. If you're living at that level, then you can make it. You can make this. You can make $1.5 million at 5.847% a year. We basically just ran this to find Z. We ran this and we plugged in 100,000 here. We plugged in the taxes, we plugged in the expenses here, and those are constants essentially. And we figured that out. So, salary is very important, but it's really this one that's the most important. After taxes, after expenses. I'd highly recommend for everyone here and anyone watching on the video on YouTube, highly recommend if you're an Aggie or if you're at a college, go to your money management center. It's probably called something else. Go to your career center. Go talk to those people and make sure you can position yourself in such a way that when you graduate, you're not just chasing the highest salary. You're not going to like New York where living expenses are absolutely ridiculous, right? You're actually going to make less money than if you lived in Dallas or Houston. So now we're going to talk about why it's really important to invest your money when you're young. All right, we're going to look at the fundamental aspect of that last equation. See that? Exponential, right? That's 1 plus the rate of return raised to the x. All right, that's exponential growth. Okay? What does this mean? If you have a graph here, and this is age, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. And this is total money. Like 10 mil, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, here. Let's calculate doubling time. Doubling time is the amount of time it takes for you to double your money. Really easy way of doing this is you take 72 divided by your rate of return, right? if, let's just let's just make it easy. We'll say you make 7.2% return on your investment every year. Okay, that means that doubling time, 10 years. Doubling time is 10 years, right? So let's just say that at age 20 you invested $1 million. Okay? In 10 years that's going to be $2 million. In 40 years that's going to be $4 million. And in 50 years that's going to be $8 million. And in 60 years that's going to be way the heck up here at $16 million. Let's take this a little differently. Let's say you wait till you're 30 to invest $1 million, right? And you can just think of this as $1 or $5 or $10, just the point's the same. Say you wait till you're 30 to get into the stock market eventually, right? So then when you're 40, it's going to be $2 million. And when you're 50, it's going to be $4 million. It's like this. Look this. You missed out on $4 million because you waited 10 years. It's the same with everything in investing. The earlier you start, the better it is when you end, because it's exponential growth. And the more time you're in and the higher the rate of return, the bigger the difference is going to be. Doubling time is really important. When you're young, don't go out and buy expensive food. Don't go get expensive clothes. Don't go get an expensive car. Don't buy a big house. You need to save your money and invest it all, because otherwise, instead of being up here, you're here. Okay? Understand? Very important stuff. I know we talked about a lot of stuff today. If you have any questions, I'll take them at this time, or if you want to just think about it a little bit more, you can send all your questions into ASPPN service. I guess I'll write it down. You can send all your questions, ASPPN service at gmail.com. If you guys have any suggestions for what workshops you'd like to see later, send us an email. But yeah, let's get in. What questions do you guys have?